Probably Freeze's favorite character in all of fighting games, for very good reasons, Highlander flips the script for a lot of the game. You guys chose him first, and I know 100% why that is, despite the fact that half the poll was made up of characters that the community despises. Highlander is probably For Honor's hardest character mechanically, considering that he's a negative edge character whose main defense is disabled in order to access his offense. Starting off with a defensive stance, Highlander has a few options to trade in his favor, and this is probably your best stance when in a teamfight or anti-gank due to its access to crushing counters and armored heavies. Your light openers block incoming attacks if done from the same side, and if they do successfully block an attack, the light becomes unblockable to 6 more damage and is guaranteed against the person you CC'd. Your heavies are notably slower than most characters with a start of 800 milliseconds for top and 900 for the side, but at least they get armor at 700 ms. These heavies also do something reservedly considered a shit ton of damage, at least from the side in 27, which really gives you a reason to be using anything else in a teamfight. I would heavily recommend taking advantage of Highlander's sharpened boulder and putting that all over the screen to dissuade your enemies from attacking, though generally don't use defensive stance in 1v1s unless you see a free punch somewhere. Contrary to defensive stance, your offensive stance is called such because it pisses people off with just how many lights they'll eat. Or maybe because you trade defense for offense, I wouldn't know, I'm not Ubisoft. While in offensive stance, you lose your guard and recover from side dodges much faster than normal, at 600 milliseconds than 633. While in offensive stance, you lose your guard and recover from side dodges much faster than normal, at 600 milliseconds rather than 633. Before I talk about your offensive stance tools, I feel that it's important that I first cover the best ways to get to it so you don't get light out of it by trying to enter it from neutral. After every parry, attack, and feint, you can hold down heavy to fast flow in offensive stance, though you'll really only ever want to enter OS off of attacks and parries because those are the actually safe options. Another tool that was nerfed to be less cancer not that long ago was backstep lighting to enter offensive stance, though it can still work if you know your spacing. And I cannot stress this enough, but do not enter offensive stance without forcing the enemy to let you. If you land a defensive hit, watch to see if they go and hit something, and if they do, take the chance to enter offensive stance. Not to mention, the instant you enter offensive stance, you want that enemy on the back foot. Put something on screen or even bait a defensive tool out of them by emoting or feinting. Just remember that any hard feint will send you back to defensive stance, so make sure you know your feints are worth it before throwing one. The main thing you want to know about getting into offensive stance is that simply entering it doesn't do anything. Scare the enemy. Do not let them have their turn back. Anytime you're in offensive stance, you want to at least be pressuring them or know that there is pressure elsewhere. What I tend to do is put some lights on them, considering most players can't react to them. Luckily, your offensive lights are 400 milliseconds instead of 500, so you already know that half the player base thinks they're unreactable. Mind that they also do less damage at 9 instead of 12. Take advantage of that, and remember that offensive stance lights don't bounce on blocks, so you can pretty easily get away with spamming them so long as you don't get predictable with them. Typically, you can very easily check attempted light parries by throwing random heavies in the middle of your light spam, and those heavies aren't useless outside of that timing change. They trade the armor for being unblockable, and the side heavies get to even be the same speed as the top heavy in 800 milliseconds. Another invaluable thing about those heavies is that they can soft feint as Fomorian Kick and Caber Toss, two bashes that, while slower than most opener bashes, cover different dodge timings. You can also use both bashes from neutral if you so desire, and you can also soft feint the kick into caber, though not the other way around. Both of those bashes guarantee a heavy, and kick can also be hard feinted, but again, don't feint unless you know it's going to give you a hit or keep you safe. Generally, Highlander is built entirely around hard reads for his damage, and he really only has the tools to back off rather than stay in if he misses an opportunity. Your best response for Highlander is rarely ever the same, considering just how all or nothing he is as a character, which might be why Freeze doesn't like him considering how much thinking you have to— I mean, what? Who said that? I heavily recommend learning what your enemies let you do before going super heavy into an offensive stance, but the second you know what your enemy's doing, never leave offensive stance until you are forced out of it. All of those defensive-only Lightlanders are the antithesis to how you play him, though if you've ever had your femurs shouted by a god Highlander, you don't need me to tell you that. However, you should know that offensive is very good at landing hits, but not so much as maximizing damage. Your out of stamina punish on forward or side throws is light heavy, and the same for any out of stamina parrying. Also remember that you can flow back into offensive stance after the heavy, so do that. However, in a callback to last episode, Highlander also gets an execution punish. Unlike Hito, he doesn't give up any damage for it, so really all you lose in doing it is stamina and time, which doesn't really matter if you can spend those things to kill. Your execution punish is light, offensive fast flow, kick to caber, heavy. I would really recommend practicing this punish in training mode because of all the moving parts, but you'll know your own mechanical skill better than I will. Moving on to feats, at least Highlanders aren't useless. In fact, a good few of them are even really good. As in, I do not think there are any objectively useless ones in this kit, which is only a good thing. For tier 1, you have Rush, Body Count, and Fast Recovery. Rush boosts movement speed by 30% for 10 seconds, which is especially good for Highlander considering Shigoki fucking rolls between points faster than Highlander. A man with thighs that muscular can sprint. Why does the bodybuilder run slower than a fucking type 2 dive? I think it's worth running, but Highlander has a really hard choice between his tier 1s. At least he would if fast recovery didn't exist. Body count heals you for 1 HP and 1 stamina for every minion you kill, which means it's great if you clear minions in Dominion, and useless if you so much as look at anything else. Oh, and also your last option for tier 1 is rough cavalry, so your entire 2 free use feats are just window dressing for all the good they do in comparison. Watch the Hito video, or really just the fucking footage that's been playing all video if you need to know why fast recovery is as broken as it is. Your tier 2 feats are Bear Trap, Inspire, and Winner's Advantage. Bear Trap lets you set up, you guessed it, a date with the right spooky Bear Trap. This trap stays on the map until it's triggered, or until you specifically try to place a second one. The Bear Trap does 25 damage and forces the enemy to a pin for 2 seconds, or until they get hit. It's okay, it lets you get a free advantage on the fight if you're in the area, but try not to be predictable with it, because it's still visible to your enemies and they can waste it by rolling out of its range before it snaps. Inspire gives you and all allies within 10 meters a 20% damage boost, while also making nearby minions move and fight faster. This feat lasts 20 seconds and is directly as useful as you play to the team. Generally not as useful if you play more solo, but it is a potent boost to damage no matter what. Winner's Advantage makes you even more frightening if you play like I do and press a lot of buttons to overwhelm the enemy, as anytime you land a hit, you get a 20% damage boost for the next 1.5 seconds automatically. Generally your best choice if you opt an anti-gank or just don't want to commit to popping a feat before fights. Your tier 3 options lie in Second Wind, Longbow, and Fury. Second Wind is a pretty useful sustained feat in that you heal 30 after an extremely short animation that the info hub does not want to tell me the timing of. It just says instantly, but you and I can both see that's not true. Why the hell is the most common healing feat actively not measured? I don't fucking know, but thanks for nothing I guess. The script is pissing me off. Longbow lets you fire a longbow that does 50 damage and takes 700 milliseconds to fire. But remember that nothing in this game is hit scan, so do not try it on a parry because the enemy can still dodge it in the time, and also it just might whiff anyways because fuck you, that's why. It's fine, though it is objectively funny because shameless plug. It can clean up some kills you wouldn't otherwise get and has the benefit of not warning the enemy you're aiming at if you're not on their screen. Fury gives you 20 seconds of a 20% damage boost in addition to a 15% movement boost that no one on the face of this planet has ever considered using because you're not wasting tier 3 on movement speed. It's really good, especially on Highlander, because you get the ability to trade so favorably as is. Your tier 4s are Spearstorm, Fire Flask, and Champion's Aura. Man, Highlander really got his tier 4s gutted super hard, huh? 2 previously broken feats that are now comparatively useless, even if they're just okay now. Spearstorm is Highlander's signature feat, and it can only be used outdoors, which if you've ever played the game before, you know raises red flags as is. Casting Spearstorm launches 3 waves of 30 damage spears that are aimed kinda in the area. Typically this just means the feat doesn't have near misses, but good god I don't know if I should cry or laugh at the loss of 70 damage per tick Spearstorm. It's probably the worst outdoor feat now when it used to be the best one, but you really can't scoff at doing 90 damage to the entire enemy team, even if they have to be really close for that max damage. I would really recommend looking at the map before picking your tier 4s as Highlander, because if you get Gauntlet or something, first off my condolences, that map fucking sucks, and second, just bring Fire Flask instead. Fire Flask is a grenade feat that explodes after 1100 milliseconds and does 20 to 30 direct damage in 10 meters, while also leaving fire on the ground that stacks 10 burn per second spin in the fire. Being a dot feat by default makes it range from god tier to useless depending on the enemy's loadout, because remember that dedicated heal feats cleanse dots. However, dots single-handedly let you make chip damage not a joke mechanic. After all, just because you can't kill with chip doesn't mean you can't ship the enemy's real health low enough that all they have is dot health left, which can kill. It's fine now, still nasty if you fury boost it, but it's not a win con feat anymore, thank god. Champion's Aura is what happens when you put Highlander in SP914 with a healing banner, turning him into a Highlander healing banner hybrid. Also he gets stage 4 testicular cancer, but you win some you lose some, you know? For 30 seconds you emit a 12 meter healing aura that over its entire lifespan heals a total of 100 HP, yourself included. It single-handedly turns off Bleed Specialist for its duration, just like Heal Banner, but they also can't force the team out of it because you are, indeed, it. If your team has damage otherwise, or you're playing Defenders on Breach, I highly recommend it. Highlander's perks that aren't hot garbage, because, like I said, I'm not covering them, are all the same as in the Heated Carry video, so not to be a broken record, you can check this timestamp of this specific video. Don't worry, I'll also put it in the description. However, I will tell you what I recommend on them just so you aren't walking away with nothing. Bastion is a 10% defense boost when on an objective or point of interest. I think considering just how many little touches you end up taking as Highlander and how they'll be more spread out, it's not as important, but it's still 12 extra effective HP. Also, it's your only useful level 1 perk, so you're not losing anything taking it. Vengeful Bearer, spoilers, will always be useful on anyone that has it. Revenge Shield Bug, better anti-gank, more tankiness, lets you better capitalize on Last Stand, another level 2 that is pretty much an insta-pick. It's also your only level 2 on Highlander, so you literally cannot choose anything else, even if you wanted to. And the level 3s are Last Stand, which gives 40% defense when below 26 HP, always useful, just like in Warrior Ishimehito, it procs later than I would prefer. Fresh Focus is a perk that you should never use on anyone that has fast recovery. Just take fast recovery. You won't be out of stamina long enough to actually see this perk do anything anyways. Bulk Up gives you 4 max HP per renown level, and unlike Hito, this feat is far more useful on Highlander because for some reason he only has 125 HP instead of 140. Same HP value as Berserker, the tiny man that acts like a chihuahua. Yep, definitely makes sense. Generally after Highlander's rework, I would consider him a high tier. Most people don't see that in him, but most people also don't know how to play characters with more depth than Conk. What do you mean 200 hours on Conk? Nah, that's gotta be someone else. Anyways, Drip. Highlander is one of the few Vikings that actually knows how to dress, though considering that he's competing with homeless people and literal cannibals, that's not much of a compliment. He doesn't have many options, but he does have options, and so I'm going to give him a 5 out of 10 just because he's got a lot of decent gear mixed in with a lot of slop, and also a pretty clean hero skin. So all that said, if you love hard read characters and other fighting games, and want to feel like a badass after 4 clean reads in a row, or if you're just a gremlin that is incredibly infuriating to play against, like me, then I ask of you, show all those dolts what you don't stop pressing just why you should main Highlander. Catch you nerds in the next one, and take care. That said, I do want to thank you guys for the response for why you should main Hito. You don't know just how happy I was to see that the passion I have this for the game can actually make something worthwhile, even in spite of how jagged a few of the edges of the final product were. Thank you, genuinely, and if you have anything to ask, critique, or even more tips to add to budding Highlander mains, then I'd love to hear it. Genuinely, thank you all. It means a lot. Catch you nerds later.